Let me ask you three questions. Do you ever feel totally lost in a fog? Do you ever feel like you're totally exhausted and you still got 50 feet to go to the goal line? You ever ask yourself, have I even got what it takes to make it in this particular area? Let's talk about those. As a senior executive, president, executive director, CEO, there are three enemies you have as a leader. And these are what I consider the three greatest enemies of your leadership. They're not complicated, but they are three very significant enemies. Number one is fog. Have you ever felt like you're lost in a fog? If you have a Maserati, the Maserati is on the Autobahn where there are no speed limits, and you come over the hill and you look down in the valley, there's a dense fog down there. What's the smartest thing you can think of to do? There's always someone that says, hit the accelerator, but you know what the answer is. The wisest thing to do is to slow down. And in a dense fog, you're running a mile or two an hour, maybe. And that fog is exhausting because not only are you sort of keeping your eyes open so you don't hit something, you're worried, is someone going to rear end me? That fog is the time when you call a good friend and say, hey, my head's in a fog. I need some help to blow that fog out of my thinking. Or it's where you call someone like Dan Loney or Amy and say, hey, I need some help and some objective perspective to get the fog away. The second enemy of leadership, you ever feel like you're completely exhausted but still have like 50 yards to go to the goal line? You're exhausted. When you're driving in a fog too long, you always get to the point where your second point is feeling exhausted. Vince Lombardi, the coach of the Green Bay Packers, said, fatigue makes cowards of us all. What seems easy when you're rested seems impossible when you're exhausted. And what you're going to find is that it's important for you to keep an annual balance, to where you protect yourself by balancing your schedule, where you take some time off. And what you do is you basically look at your entire annual calendar, the things that happen every year at this point, whether it's Christmas or New Year's or whatever it is, and you basically say, what are my slow seasons in life? And in your slow seasons, you put your vacations and your staff planning and all that kind of thing. In your busy season, you block it out because that's a busy season. But you protect yourself from the fog, you protect yourself from the fatigue, because there's a third dimension here, and that's flirtations. You begin flirting with ideas you should never flirt with. Have you ever questioned whether you should just basically take another position? When you rest up, you get to the point where you say, what was I thinking? I shouldn't leave this organization. But at certain points, you begin flirting with ideas you'd never flirt with if you were rested. So the three enemies again are fog, fatigue, and flirtation. Those are your enemies of leadership. Now, how do you get to the point where you're encouraged? If you're exhausted, etc., what is it that what is the one thought that is typically very, very encouraging to senior executives? May surprise you. The thought is that your single most productive decade in your entire lifetime is actually your 60s. It's actually your 60s. If you're 30 and are exhausted, are fatigued and in fog and exhausted, you may think, I'm not sure if I've got it. But when you think, you know what? I've got a while before I hit my big time. I don't have to have changed the world quite yet. I say, keep remembering your 60s is your most productive decade. It gives you perspective in the middle of that fog, in the middle of fatigue, in the middle of when you're flirting with ideas you'd never flirt with if you were rested. Just keep remembering, your 60s is your single most productive decade. Your 70s, if you have health, is the second most productive. And your 50s is the third most productive if you have your health. Don't ever forget, your 60s is your most productive decade.